Mid-20th century Europe, a continent shattered by two world wars, its faith, its order, its meaning in ruins. And in a Paris cafe, a young man begins to write. He isn't offering salvation, but confrontation. For him, there is no given essence, no divine plan. If God does not exist, then the task of creating meaning falls entirely on us. That young man was Jean-Paul Sartre, and his philosophy became the voice of a generation. Man is condemned to be free. Jean-Paul Sartre was born in Paris in 1905. He lost his father when he was very young and grew up surrounded by books in the quiet presence of his mother. Even as a child, he sensed that what separated people was not intelligence, but the way they looked at the world. He studied philosophy at the École Normale Supérieure alongside Raymond Aron and Maurice Merleau-Ponty. But Sartre would soon become a thinker apart, a voice entirely his own. In his notebooks, one word kept appearing: freedom. When World War II began, Sartre served as a meteorology officer in the French army. He was captured by the Germans and spent a year as a prisoner of war. It was in that silence behind the wire fences that his philosophy began to take shape. He watched men break under despair, yet realized something profound. Even in captivity, one could still choose. One could still define oneself. That conviction became the heart of his thought. Whatever happens, man is still free. When he returned to Paris, the city was still under occupation. Between the cafes of Saint-Germain, Sartre began building a new way of seeing the world. There he met Simone de Beauvoir, the most important companion of his life. They had both passed the same philosophy exam, but what united them was more than intellect. Their relationship defied convention. No marriage, no ownership, only a pact. We choose each other freely. Sartre called her his necessary love. They turned freedom itself into a form of honesty. Beauvoir's own voice soon rose beside his. In The Second Sex, she laid the foundation of modern feminism, a philosophy of woman as self-defining subject. They never lived together, yet remained bound by the same pursuit: to think, to love, to remain free. Sartre's most famous statement is deceptively simple. Existence precedes essence. It means we exist first, without definition, and only later do we become something. There is no human nature given at birth, no moral code written in the sky. We invent ourselves through our choices. Freedom is not a gift, it is a weight. It brings with it responsibility. Anxiety, Sartre said, is the dizziness of freedom. To be free is not to do whatever we want. It is to know that we alone bear the consequences of what we choose. The idea of being thrown into the world actually belongs to the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. In Being and Time, Heidegger wrote that human beings find themselves suddenly and without choice thrown into existence, into a time, a place, a history they did not select. He called this state Geworfenheit, thrownness. But Sartre transformed this idea. Yes, we are thrown into the world, he said, but that is not a sentence. It is a possibility. For Heidegger, thrownness was a passive awareness. For Sartre, it became active responsibility. We cannot choose our circumstances, but we can choose what they mean. We are not prisoners of the world we find ourselves in. We are its creators. Man must make himself in the world he finds himself thrown into. In post-war Paris, Sartre and Albert Camus were the twin lights of existential thought. Both spoke of freedom, absurdity, and rebellion. But in 1951, Camus published The Rebel, and the friendship fractured. Camus sought moral measure within rebellion, a humanism of limits. Sartre, meanwhile, pushed further. If there is no God, then meaning must come entirely from human action. Sartre accused Camus of naive humanism. Camus replied that Sartre had surrendered to ideology. They never reconciled, yet history now reads them as two halves of the same truth. Camus spoke for the heart, Sartre for the mind. After Camus' death, Sartre wrote, "The conscience of our generation has died." Jean-Paul Sartre was not only a philosopher, he was also a novelist, playwright, and literary critic. Through his works, he sought to bring philosophy out of the classroom and into the experience of ordinary life. His first major novel, Nausea, in 1938, tells the story of a man overwhelmed by the sheer existence of things, the realization that the world has no inherent meaning. Being is without reason, Sartre wrote, and that is why it makes us sick. Later in his play No Exit, 1944, he explored human relationships and self-deception through three characters locked in a room for eternity. From this came his most famous line, "Hell is other people." His monumental philosophical work, Being and Nothingness, became one of the defining texts of the 20th century thought. It examined consciousness, freedom, and the ways in which people flee from their own responsibility through what he called bad faith. For Sartre, literature was a form of philosophy, not an escape from it. He believed that ideas must be lived, not just written. His characters are not heroes or saints. They are mirrors of human consciousness, struggling to make meaning in a world without guarantees. After the war, Sartre became one of the most visible public intellectuals in Europe. He was not content to remain an observer. He wanted to change the world through words and ideas. He sympathized with Marxism and supported revolutionary movements, but refused to submit to any ideology or party. He spoke out against colonialism, defended Algerian independence, and criticized the hypocrisy of Western governments. His activism was not driven by political ambition, but by a deep moral urgency, the belief that silence, too, was a form of complicity. In 1964, Sartre was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for his work rich in ideas and filled with the spirit of freedom and the quest for truth. He declined it, publicly and definitively. In a letter to the Swedish Academy, he wrote that a writer must refuse to be turned into an institution. A writer should not allow himself to be transformed into an ornament. His rejection of the prize was not arrogance, but principle. He did not want his name to be tied to any authority, not even one that sought to honor him. For Sartre, freedom meant independence from all forms of validation, even from those who admired him most. This gesture summed up his entire philosophy. To live authentically, one must remain free, even from praise. For Sartre, existentialism was not a theory, but a call to action. To live authentically is to recognize that nothing defines us except what we do. Freedom, therefore, is both our privilege and our burden. No God, no law, no tradition can choose for us. That is why good and evil for Sartre are not universal categories. They are the weight of our own decisions. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. In the 1970s, Sartre lost his sight but continued to write through dictation. Simone de Beauvoir remained at his side until the end. He died in 1980. Tens of thousands attended his funeral, not to mourn a philosopher, but to salute a conscience. Beauvoir would later be buried beside him. Their graves lie together at Montparnasse Cemetery, still side by side as in life. Sartre never promised meaning. He offered something more demanding, the courage to live without guarantees. Freedom is not light, it is heavy. It asks us to build our lives with no blueprint, to bear the full weight of our choices. Man finds his essence only in his freedom. Perhaps that is why Sartre's voice still speaks to us, because we still choose who we become, what we believe, and whether we remain silent or speak. The weight of existence may never lessen, but learning to carry it is what makes us human.